I have more purpose now, and I tried so hard to...
In the early 2000s, Britney Spears wasn't just famous, she was everywhere. Her face was on billboards, her voice was on every radio station. Her name was printed on lunchboxes, perfumes, dolls, and headlines across the planet. She was the kind of superstar people assumed would die with a fortune and a crown. But then something strange happened. The girl who sold out stadiums couldn't even choose what to eat for dinner. The woman who made hundreds of millions didn't control her own bank account. And the pop icon who seemed untouchable was legally treated like a child. For 13 years, Britney lived inside a cage the world didn't fully understand. A cage built from court documents, contracts, and signatures she didn't have the power to refuse. And the scariest part, millions of people watched it happen in real time and thought it was normal. They called her crazy, they called her unstable, they called her a warning. But what if the real story isn't about a breakdown? What if it's about a takedown? Because behind the shaved head headlines and paparazzi photos, there were lawyers making moves, families cashing checks, doctors writing evaluations, and a system that quietly turned a living human being into a controlled product. And today, when Britney posts a single video online, people still ask one question: where did all her money go, and who really owned her life? Because once you see what happened to Britney Spears, you'll never look at fame the same way again. Britney Jean Spears was born on December 2, 1981, in Macomb, Mississippi, but her real childhood story began in Kentwood, Louisiana, a small town where big dreams felt almost impossible. Her family wasn't rich, not even close. They were working class, struggling. But Britney had something that made people stop and stare, a voice that sounded like confidence. Before she even understood what confidence was, by the time she was a child, she wasn't just singing in school plays. She was performing like she belonged on a stage bigger than the town itself. Her mother Lynn pushed hard. Her father Jamie was complicated, sometimes supportive, sometimes absent, sometimes a storm. And Britney, she learned early that approval wasn't given, it was earned. Then came the first crack in the fantasy. The entertainment world didn't care about innocence. It cared about profit. At only 8 years old, Britney auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club. She was told she was too young. Most kids would have gone home and forgotten the dream. Britney didn't. She trained, she practiced, she waited, and when she finally made it onto the show in the 1990s, she wasn't just surrounded by kids, she was surrounded by future legends: Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera, Ryan Gosling. But Britney stood out because she had something different, that rare mix of sweetness and star power. She looked like America's little sister, but performed like a professional, and that was the trap. Because when the world sees you as perfect, they don't let you become human. They don't let you make mistakes. They don't let you grow. And Britney didn't know it yet, but her entire life was being designed like a product. The machine was warming up, and soon, it would start printing money and demanding blood. In return, in 1998, Britney recorded a song that would detonate her life like a bomb. Baby One More Time. It wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural reset. By 1999, Britney Spears became the face of teenage pop. And her fame didn't rise slowly, it erupted. Overnight, she wasn't a girl from Louisiana anymore. She was a global obsession, and the money came fast. Albums sold in the tens of millions, tours sold out instantly, endorsement deals stacked up like bricks. Every magazine wanted her on the cover, every brand wanted her smile. But here's what most people don't realize: when someone becomes that famous, that young, they don't own their success. Other people do. Managers, lawyers, record labels, executives, everyone wanted a piece of Britney. And the moment she turned into a business, she stopped being treated like a person. Then came the sexualization, the schoolgirl outfit, the interviews asking about her body, the constant obsession with her virginity. She was barely an adult, but the world spoke about her like she was public property. And the paparazzi, they didn't just take pictures, they hunted her. Britney couldn't leave a building without being chased. She couldn't eat dinner without flashes exploding in her face. She couldn't cry without someone selling the photo. And as the fame got bigger, the pressure got uglier. Because behind the glitter, Britney wasn't sleeping. She was working non-stop. Tour, record, promo, repeat. Her schedule wasn't a calendar, it was a prison sentence. And then, she met the person who would shape the next chapter of her life: Justin Timberlake. The relationship became a media circus, and when it ended, the public didn't just judge Britney. They punished her. Suddenly, she wasn't America's sweetheart anymore. She was America's villain, and that shift, that moment the world turned on her, was the first domino in a collapse that would shock everyone. By 2006, Britney's life looked glamorous on paper, but emotionally, she was collapsing. She had 2 children. She was exhausted. She was under constant surveillance, and her marriage to Kevin Federline, another media obsession, was unraveling publicly. The tabloids didn't report her pain like news. They reported it like entertainment. And when Britney filed for divorce, the cameras didn't back off. They moved closer. Every stumble became a headline. Every tear became a joke. Then came the moment the world will never forget. Britney walked into a salon and shaved her head. Not for fashion, not for a stunt. It looked like a breakdown, but it felt like a rebellion. A desperate attempt to take control of her own body when everything else was being controlled. But instead of compassion, she got cruelty. Late-night comedians mocked her. News anchors smirked. Paparazzi sold the footage like it was gold. And then the umbrella incident. Britney attacked a paparazzi car with an umbrella. Furious, overwhelmed, trapped. And that single moment became the symbol of her insanity. But nobody asked the real question. What kind of pressure does it take to break a human being like that? Because Britney wasn't just stressed. She was being stalked. She couldn't drive without being followed. She couldn't hold her child without cameras zooming in. She couldn't breathe without someone profiting off the oxygen. And when she lost custody battles, the pain deepened. Her life became a loop of humiliation. And here's where the story gets darker, because when Britney was at her weakest, people didn't step in to help her heal. They stepped in to take control. And that's when the legal nightmare began. A nightmare so powerful, it would last for more than a decade. In February 2008, Britney Spears was hospitalized after a mental health crisis. And within days, something happened that changed her entire life. A conservatorship was created. At first, the public thought it sounded normal, a temporary legal arrangement to protect someone unstable. But this wasn't temporary. This became a full takeover. Britney's father, Jamie Spears, gained control over her finances, her career, her medical decisions, and even personal choices most adults never have to explain to anyone. Think about that. Britney Spears, the woman who built an empire, was suddenly treated like she couldn't be trusted with her own money. She couldn't sign contracts freely. She couldn't control her schedule. She couldn't decide what doctors she saw. And the scariest part, she couldn't legally fight back easily. The conservatorship system is designed for people who are severely incapable of caring for themselves, usually elderly patients with dementia. But Britney wasn't in a nursing home. She was still working. And that's where the story turns from tragic to suspicious. Because while Britney was supposedly too unwell to control her own life, she was also well enough to record albums, tour the world, perform in Las Vegas, generate millions. That contradiction is what haunted fans for years. How could someone be mentally unstable enough to be controlled, but stable enough to be a money-making machine? And behind the scenes, the people around her were getting paid. Lawyers billed thousands, managers collected percentages, security teams stayed on payroll. The machine was alive again, only this time, Britney wasn't driving it. She was trapped inside it. And as the years passed, fans began to notice something disturbing. Britney's smile looked forced. Her eyes looked tired. Her voice sounded like someone asking for help, without being allowed to say the words. Then, quietly, a movement began, and it would soon explode into something the courts could no longer ignore. After 2008, Britney's career didn't end. It intensified. She released albums. She performed on award shows. She became a Las Vegas attraction, and she did it all while legally controlled. This is where the story becomes almost unbelievable, because the conservatorship was supposed to protect Britney from herself, yet it demanded constant work from her. Vegas alone reportedly brought in massive revenue. Tickets sold out, merch flew off shelves, and Britney, still under court control, was producing wealth like a corporation. So fans started asking, if she's truly incapable, why is she still performing? But the media didn't ask that question loudly, because Britney performing was profitable for everyone. She was no longer a woman. She was a product that couldn't quit. And the more she worked, the more she seemed to disappear emotionally. In interviews, she looked rehearsed. Her answers were short, robotic, careful. People noticed she was rarely alone, always supervised, always managed. Even her social media posts felt strange. Fans began decoding her captions like they were secret messages, because deep down, people sensed something terrifying. Britney wasn't free. Then came the rumors that she was forced to take medication, that she was monitored constantly, that she wasn't allowed to drive, that she wasn't allowed to see certain friends. Some people dismissed it as conspiracy, but the whispers kept growing. And then, in 2019, Britney canceled her residency and disappeared from the public. It wasn't a comeback. It felt like a warning, because behind closed doors, something was happening again, something darker, and this time, Britney wasn't going to stay silent forever. The Free Britney movement didn't start as a headline. It started as fans. Regular people online noticed patterns. They saw her videos. They watched her expressions. They heard the way she spoke about feeling trapped, and slowly, the internet did what it does best. It connected dots. At first, the media mocked them. They called it a fan conspiracy, but then people began showing up outside courthouses, holding signs, chanting her name. And suddenly, this wasn't just fandom. It was activism. The movement forced the world to ask an uncomfortable question. What if Britney Spears isn't crazy? What if she's controlled? Then came the shocking moment that changed everything. Britney's court hearings began revealing more than anyone expected. Documents were sealed, details were hidden, and Britney's voice was absent for years. The public rarely heard directly from her in any unfiltered way. Everything was filtered through lawyers, statements, representatives. And that silence was the loudest proof. Because if Britney was truly okay with the conservatorship, why couldn't she speak? Why couldn't she explain? Why did everything feel like a corporate press release? Then the tide turned. Celebrities started supporting her publicly. Artists, actors, even politicians. Suddenly, people who once laughed at Britney began admitting something. They had been part of the cruelty. They had been entertained by her suffering, and that guilt fueled the fire. But still, the courts held the power, until one day, Britney finally got the chance to speak for herself. And what she said under oath shocked the entire world. On June 23, 2021, Britney Spears addressed the court directly. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't pop star Britney. It was a woman who sounded like she had been holding her breath for 13 years, and then she exploded. Britney called the conservatorship abusive. She said she was forced into treatment programs. She said she was controlled. She said she was made to work against her will. But the most haunting part, she said she wasn't allowed to remove her IUD. Let that sink in. One of the most famous women in the world said she couldn't make decisions about her own body, and the courtroom went silent because that wasn't celebrity drama. That was human rights. Britney said she wanted her life back. She wanted to get married. She wanted to have another child. Basic things most people never have to beg for. And then she said something that made the entire story feel even darker. She claimed her family benefited from her being trapped, that her father and others made money from controlling her, that she was being punished for wanting freedom. In that moment, the narrative flipped completely. This wasn't about saving Britney. This was about using Britney. And for the first time, people stopped asking, is she okay? They started asking, who did this to her, and why did the legal system allow it? Her testimony went viral instantly. Millions watched clips. Millions cried. Millions felt sick. Because suddenly, it wasn't a scandal. It was a captivity story. And the most terrifying part, it had been happening in plain sight for years. And now, the world demanded one thing. Freedom. After Britney's testimony, everything accelerated. Her father tried to step back, but not without resistance. Lawyers began resigning. Court filings flooded in. The pressure became too loud to ignore. And then, on November 12, 2021, the impossible happened. The conservatorship was terminated. Britney Spears was legally free. 13 years of control gone. For fans, it felt like a victory, but for Britney, freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came with trauma. Because being controlled for over a decade doesn't disappear the moment a judge signs a paper. Freedom isn't just a legal status, it's a psychological rebuild, and Britney had to rebuild from the ground up. Suddenly, she could spend her money, she could choose her doctors, she could travel without permission, but she also had to face the emotional damage, years lost, relationships broken, motherhood interrupted, trust destroyed, and the money question still haunted everyone. Britney had earned enormous wealth across her career. So why did she still feel financially limited? Because conservatorships come with fees, lawyers, security, management. Everybody gets paid. And when you are the product, you don't just lose freedom, you lose wealth. The court case ended, but the public suspicion didn't. People wanted accountability. They wanted investigations. They wanted someone to pay for what happened. But in systems like this, blame is slippery, and Britney, she wasn't chasing revenge. She was chasing peace, and that might have been the hardest part of all. Because the final chapter of Britney's story isn't about freedom. It's about what freedom costs after captivity. Today, Britney Spears isn't standing on a stage under bright lights. She's standing in something far more rare. Silence. A quiet life that once seemed impossible. She posts videos dancing in her home. She writes captions that feel chaotic, emotional, sometimes confusing, and people still judge her. But the truth is, she doesn't owe the world normal. After everything she survived, she owes herself only one thing: healing. Because Britney's story isn't a fairy tale. It's a warning about fame, about family, about how the legal system can be used like a weapon. The world watched Britney collapse and called it entertainment. The world watched her get controlled and called it protection. And only years later did people realize they weren't watching a celebrity scandal. They were watching a woman being erased. Britney may never return to music the way she once did. She may never tour again. She may never want the spotlight. And honestly, who could blame her? Because the spotlight didn't just expose her, it consumed her. But there is something powerful about her survival, not because she stayed perfect, not because she stayed polished, but because she stayed alive, and in the end, that's the part that changes everything. Britney Spears wasn't saved by the industry. She wasn't saved by the tabloids. She wasn't saved by the people who made millions off her name. She was saved by her voice, and by the world finally listening. And maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes the strongest comeback isn't a hit song. Sometimes the strongest comeback is simply taking your life back.